All right, so I just want to expound a little bit more about why I think that they did mix up the skulls in 1928 of Joseph Smith and Hyrum. Right here, this is Hyrum Smith's death mask. And so I was looking at Joseph Smith's death mask in the school because I always noticed this right orbital bone looked really blown and enlarged, and it looked that same in my photo. And then all of a sudden, the thought came to me to analyze Hyram's death mask, and that this thought kept coming to me to look up entrance and exit wounds. And I realized that there looks like there's an entrance wound in the right of his cheek. And then when you look up exit wounds, they look like what's at the nose. And my mom has worked as an ER nurse for like years and years since the 60s. She's seen them in person. She's also analyzed in school. JFK, was his murder. He'd been murdered before she became a nurse and went to school, and they looked at entrance and exit wounds, really studied it. And this is a little short video I did on my iPad where I superimposed Hyrum Smith's death mask onto the skull that they buried as Hyrum Smith, but you can see that bone is really intact. And then, but it doesn't make sense to me why that bone would be intact. And so exit wounds, people say that possibly there's cotton in the left of his nose and that's why it looks enlarged, but exit wounds actually just really look like that if you look it up. And they cause the most damage. It would have damaged all those bones, but then this is just a Smith's death mask superimposed onto the skull that they buried as Hyrum Smith in 1928. And it matches up really well. And what I really notice is like that nasal bone on the death mask and the skull that I think is Joseph's. It looks like he's had a broken nose that is remodeled and is angled really far to the right. And you see that same angle. And I see the same angle in the photograph that I own that I think matches the death mask really well, that there's just a sharp angle, but then the cartilage of the nose is like shoved the other way, which caused, in my opinion, looks like there's an indentation on the right cartilage, right above that nasal area. And so I think that's where there's that weird curve on the right of Joseph Smith's nose on his death mask. I think the bone remodeled to the right, but then the nose was shoved or held. I don't know how they tried to fix a broken nose back then. And then also another reason why I think that skull buried as Hyram's is Joseph's, because you'll see that there is a broken bone all the way up to the left orbital bone. And I noticed just, and I've kind of measured, with different objects, just looking at, is there more of the death mask showing on the right side of his face, of his death mask, than on the left? And there definitely is, so. Okay, and then now what I do is superimpose the death mask of Hyrum Smith on the skull that I think is Hyram's, that is missing a ton of facial bones, and so it would make sense if that is the entrance wound on the right of his cheek and the exit wound is where his nose is, because they always looked, the skin was always just mangled as the bullet comes out, and it causes the most damage as the bullet comes out. That is just how exit wounds looked, and I definitely don't think that, well, I really don't think that Hyram's face was actually pressed against the door. People say, oh, well, it's like the wood splintered and it made the skin look that, or it made the hole bigger. And that's not true, because there's only one hole in the door that I'll show you in a second here. And then in the account on the Joseph Smith journals, it shows that Hyrum had actually left. There's one hole in the door, and he left the door after that hole went through the door. And so you do know that they all were pressing against the door. There's one bullet hole through this door. This is the picture of Carthage jail. They think that they shot, like the lock or something, but they say they're pushing against the door. A hole comes to the door. They all leap. They went away from the door. And then Hyrum goes back to the door, but he never says that his face is pressed against the door when he gets shot. I mean, the door is open because he's angled his hand around and he's shooting out the door. So Hyrum is shooting, trying to protect the three other men in the room. And so I'm just going to pull up the Joseph Smith Papers account to show you that he was not pressed against the door as he was shot. 100 men 100 armed men are coming in. Joseph and Hyrum take off their coats, so they do spring against the door. So at this point, they're leaning against the door, and bullets are coming up. Then, as they're pushing against the door, one comes through the door. Joseph and Richards, they leave the door. And so it's clear, since he says Hyrum goes back, that he's left the door. A hole has already gone through the door. And then Hyrum goes back in front of the door, but it doesn't describe him as pushing his face against the door, and clearly he's sticking his arm out an open door and snapping his pistol, trying to protect his younger brother, and then he gets shot. And Willard Richards says it's the left side of his nose, so no one's ever questioned that. And then as you read, it kind of ends there, but then Willard Richards continues on, and Joseph left from the window. Taylor is getting shot, and he fell on his left side. And so Willard Richards saw him that he was on his left side, and so that's what I'm talking about. The left side of his death mask showing less. He's just covering a little bit less, like it's subtle, but you can see this wraps around just a little bit more. It's just kind of what I think. And so you can just see, looking really up close at the skull, that the bone is just broken all the way up to that left orbital bone. And so he fell on his left side. I mean, there is a hole actually totally through the skull. He probably got shot. I think I heard an account about him getting shot in the head. They would have done that to Joseph. I don't see them doing that to Hyrum or any indication of that. I'll have to find that where someone said they shot him in the head. But anyway, so essentially, I can see in my photo a nose that looks like it's been broken and remodeled, and the nasal bone itself looks like it's remodeled, angled to his right. And I see that in the skull that I think is Joseph Smith's, according to my various theories and opinions here. And I also see that in the death mask that we know is of Joseph Smith, that the nasal bone on Joseph Smith's death mask looks like it was remodeled and angles to his right. But then the rest of the nose is like the cartilage and everything is sort of shoved the other way, which looks really painful. But yeah, so that just really, that is the main thing. And then the fact that the right orbital bone looks really enlarged in my photo as it does on the skull, that was what really kind of got me. And I do, I'm quite positive that what I see on Hyrum's death mask is an entrance wound in the right of his cheek. There's blood on the right of his shirt, but no hole there. It makes sense that that skull with missing facial bones is Hyrum's, because his face looked more damaged. Joseph's, everyone said it didn't look very damaged when they saw him. Anyway, those were my theories. Believe me or agree with someone else, it's fine, but have a good day.